Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition's press conference for April 6, 2023. I will introduce my panel from the right. There is none other than the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament, and to his right, Mr. Elson Lowe, economist. Today's press statement will be read by the Leader of the Opposition.
Our proposed rent assistance scheme will combat the rising cost of living, and together with our rent-to-own scheme, they will raise living standards. In my parliamentary presentation on Budget 2023, one of the several people-centered proposals that we highlighted was in the housing sector. It was stated that house lots and housing are not the same, and while house lots are on offer, many Guyanese cannot afford to build. As such, we stated that among other housing solutions, a coalition government will construct low-income rent-to-own housing schemes, where the rent payment of dwellers will go towards the purchase and eventual ownership of their homes. A critical aspect of this scheme is that eligible persons will not be asked to make down payments. The current requirement for down payments of several $100,000 has only served to deny many low-income families access to housing. Under a coalition government, compulsory down payments will be scrapped. Additionally, as the PNCR and coalition proud track record in housing has amply showed, when we talk about housing, we mean quality dwellings that are sturdy, appealing, and spacious. We therefore share in the public dismay and shock over the questionable design, small size, and poor construction of many of the so-called houses the PPP government is erecting in such areas as Great Diamond, East Bank, Demerara. Low-income housing must not mean low-quality, cramped, and low-durability houses. We call on the relevant inspectorates within the Ministry of Health and the Guyana Bureau of Standards to urgently assess whether these structures comply with local and international building safety and health codes. Today, we wish to add another component of our housing policy. Our housing policy will not ignore the reality that as many as 30,000 Guyanese households continue to live as tenants. Even as our policies facilitate greater home ownership, a coalition government will address the social and financial hardships of families who rent. Rent constitutes a major portion of low-income family budget, as high as 40 to 50% on average. As the conventional wisdom goes, the rent eats first. In many households, rent costs severely cut into the cash remaining to purchase food, pay utilities, and afford other necessities. A coalition government will therefore provide support to ensure rent payments do not trap families in poverty. We will therefore introduce a rent assistance scheme. Its design and operation will guarantee housing security for tenants, fair return on investment for landlords, and incentives to ensure that the renting housing stock is regularly maintained and renovated. We also envisage such a scheme as a structured and effective way to help ease the current high cost of living. Such a scheme, along with our earlier proposed relief on electricity and water payments for low-income households, can together serve both for poverty alleviation and cost of living relief. Several countries have such programs from which we can adopt best practices and avoid pitfalls. This is what we mean when we say that we will develop people-centered programs that bring genuine relief to our people. It should be obvious to all that the present government is visionless And what Guyana needs is a government with big plans and a big vision, and one which puts people first. We feel the frustrations, weariness, and disappointment of the Guyanese people. We believe we can make Guyana one of the best countries to live in.
And the other half of the statement will be read by Mr. Elson Law.
Thank you, Shanika. A coalition government will maximize the country's revenues from its oil resources. The exposures in the Stabroek News of the audit of operations of ExxonMobil Guyana from 1999 to 2017 should alarm expenses could be disputed by the Guyana government as they were not allowable or did not have sufficient supporting documentation. Two, the PUP government, true to form, kept citizens in the dark on the progress of the audit. And three, the PPP government is showing a marked lack of urgency to complete the audit cycle and to engage ExxonMobil in recovering all disallowed expenses, even though the first audit report was submitted in March of 2021. That is, over 2 years ago. Government must, of necessity, protect the interests of the people of Guyana. Unfortunately, this is not the case at present. The record will show that it was the APNU AFC government which hired the UK firm IHS Markit to undertake this inaugural audit of all pre-contract costs and all exploration and development costs up to the 1st December 2017. In contrast, the PPP has decided to play games with the country's oil revenues. For perspective, Guyanese should note that the questionable US $214 million or Guyana $46 billion is close to 6% of the total 2023 budget. But it is bigger than the 2023 budget for the Ministry of Human Services by 6 billion Guyana dollars, bigger than the budget for the Ministry of Agriculture by about $13 billion, and bigger than the budget for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport by $39 billion. Despite the magnitude of the sums involved, the government's attitude reeks of collusion, negligence, and recklessness. We must therefore be fearful with regards to the second audit being conducted by VHE Consulting for the period 2018 to 2020, which involves the sum of US $7.3 billion. That is a sum over 4 times larger than the first audit. Let us recall that our press conference on 6 December 2022, we reminded the nation that the PPP agreed to conduct this second audit only after persistent public pressure. Furthermore, we had insisted that the audit of oil receipts must be based on an assessment, and I quote, an assessment of reasonable and competitive prices. That's what's in the PSA. If properly done, we expect the second audit to reveal greater amounts of contestable expenditures. The revelations in the first audit justify our calls for the government to walk the talk in building local capacity to effectively audit and monitor the operations of ExxonMobil Guyana. And secondly, on ensuring that all Guyanese fully and fairly benefit from the proceeds of oil. We reiterate those calls today. Meanwhile, Guyanese must demand that the PPP release all the audit reports and recover all invalid expenses. The PPP's cavalier attitude in the management of the country's national patrimony will cost Guyana tens of millions of dollars, of billions of dollars. This disaster must not be allowed to persist. Today, however, we wish to state a broader position. We believe matters have reached a point in the development of our oil sector where the country must now take stock, review its experiences, and recalibrate its oil development strategy. Going forward, Guyana must urgently exercise intelligence and foresight to maximize the country's oil revenues under the current Exxon PSA, in parallel with efforts to ensure the people of Guyana obtain the maximum benefit that we can get. We therefore find Barjagdio's reported statement that the PPC government plans to fast track the oil industry for a minimum of 15 years as reckless, wild, and a recipe for massive loss and leakages of revenue that is needed for the development of the people of Guyana. Instead, we propose that Guyana needs to develop a strategy to phase the development of new projects in the Stabroek Block in a manner that allows us to increase our takings through higher profit oil also. At the moment, the 50-50 split gets Guyana only 12.5% of our revenues, a percentage that seems unlikely to budge under the ongoing oil rush. With 5 FPSOs already in operation or already approved, the country is now well positioned to seek a larger cut of the pie. In terms of numbers, the 25% profit oil must be allowed to increase so that the 50-50 split would earn Guyana increasingly more than 12.5%. Therefore, the government must invite Exxon to the table to work out a balance between expenditures and revenues that will allow Guyana's current share of profit oil to gradually and quickly rise from 12.5%. At these talks, the government must rely on expert technical advice to arrive at best fit decisions based on ESSO's cost recovery statements and its expenditure forecasts for exploration, development, and production. Of necessity, allowing profit oil to grow from 25% would require a measured spacing out of the company's expenditure on new developments so that it can recover its earlier investment cost faster. At the end of the day, Guyana's oil lifts must increase due both to higher oil production and to a greater share of that production. Importantly, such negotiations between the government and the operator could occur within the framework of the existing 2016 PSA. A measured pace of new oil developments will also allow the country to get its act together in terms of its institutional capacity building to monitor, evaluate, and audit operations. Jagdio's position that Guyana must extract its oil as fast as possible will fail to fully serve Guyana's interests, as it is a formula for billion-dollar leakages, losses, missed opportunities, and disasters. The proper balance must be found between continued expansion of oil production and a greater share of the profit for the country. With good faith negotiations, the company can still get high returns on its investment, while Guyana can maximize its oil proceeds.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I will open the floor for questions on the press statement. And, as customary, state your name, your house, and by the raise of hand. Miss Davina.
Hello, good day, everyone. Mr. Lowe, you spoke about getting more out of the current PSA. How I know the party has and the opposition has said before that you don't, specifically Mr. Norton, that you don't believe in the renegotiation of this Exxon deal. But how are you suggesting that we get to
The maximum
increase
benefit?
the 25% profit oil? How are you suggesting that we do this, and also within the current framework?
Two important things that we really want to point out. The first is that we've spoken repeatedly about the importance of auditing. Now we are seeing that there's 214 million US there the government has been keeping from the Guyanese people. No one had any idea that these funds were there, even though we said that this was a possibility. Now, if you look at that 214 million and you look at the current audit that is going on, you're looking at over $1 billion that the country could save. So that's $1 billion of revenue that the country could get just from properly enforcing the existing PSA. We want to again remind the nation the PUP let the deadline for the current audit pass. They did not intend to audit these costs. They did not intend to. It is through relentless public pressure that we got them to audit these expenses. That means that civil society, the opposition, the media was able to get for the Guyanese people. It could be as much as 900 million US. Folks, we have to take auditing seriously, because if we look at this over a period of time, that's tens of billions of dollars that the PUP is perfectly willing to let go, leak away, and the country not benefit from. That is an extremely serious amount of money we're talking about there. That's the first element of it. Now, in our statement, what we've indicated is that through working along with the company, what we can do is we can space out these developments and therefore allow for a shift from it being 12.5% that the country gets of that profit oil split to a higher percentage. Obviously, as oil production continues, you'll see costs paid off, and that means that the share of profit oil can grow because you're actually seeing the cost oil diminish or be reduced. And so through thoughtful spacing things out, you can benefit in that way. What we also want to point out is that it is, as Guyana is a developing country, getting oil revenues earlier, where we can invest in things like education and health and infrastructure and various other social services, can yield very high returns to the economy and to the society. And so spacing things out thoughtfully can actually yield a much better return than rushing things as the government has indicated they will do.
So just for clarity, you're not calling for profit oil to be increased, or the share of cost oil recovery from 75% to be decreased. You're calling for sort of a ring fencing provision to be implemented?
Well, I wouldn't call it ring fencing. What it is a spacing out of developments. And of course, we as a government, you'd be able to, working along with the operator to get a sense of their costs, generate a good understanding of what you expect revenues to be year to year. And those are really the types of intelligent discussions that the government should be having to ensure that we're able to benefit in terms of having revenue earlier that can be invested in ways that will benefit all Guyanese.
And just for me, finally, the audit that was recently conducted, we know that GRA and the government has come up with a statement to say that this was just a preliminary report that was released and leaked to the media that they have been reporting on. They have found so far that there's a 214 million US that could possibly not be recoverable. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that it could be more, it could be less? What are your thoughts?
Well, that 214 million US is 12.8%. We have previously said that it's a possibility around about 10% would be costs that need to be questioned. Of course, this I think is a close number, gives you an assessment of that. But really what we want to ensure that the Guyanese people are aware of and are focused on is there is no need for this degree of extreme secrecy around these types of arrangements. And for this much time to have passed, I think it raises questions in every Guyanese person's mind that as to why the government was being so secretive, as to why they were hiding this 214 million US dollars, and as to whether this is going to be the norm going forward. You will, of course, recall that we've been calling for the release of the current audit for some time, and the government keeps extending the deadline and saying that they're pushing it back and they're pushing it back. Now, we believe that the government, if it is allowed to, will never release an audit. Will never release them. They have had 2 years to say something about this existing audit. Haven't said anything. This current audit, they keep pushing back the deadline. They don't intend to release audits. So it is our responsibility as a society to deal with this and to ensure that they understand that it is not acceptable for them to throw away tens of billions of US.
Thank you. As I have the floor, Madam Chair, can you please permit me to ask another question?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe or Mr. Opposition Leader, can you say if your party or the opposition generally has submitted any recommendations or comments during the 14-day period on the draft PSA?
We haven't submitted any comments. We do have comments. We've had discussions, and at the appropriate time, we'll release those to the media regarding our specific concerns.
Can you say what of your some of your concerns at this point?
We don't want to bring those out quite yet, but we'll bring them out in a structured way that will help Guyanese to understand where the dangers lie.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions on the press statement? Mr. Adam Harris.
Hi, very good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is a follow-up to the question Davina asked just now. Last week, former head of the EPA, Dr. Vince Adams, described the recent PSA as a tool to protect ExxonMobil, and it's an insult to the Guyanese. Does that view coincide with your position, Mr. Lowe, or opposition leader?
One of the things we want to point out, because we want to ensure that Guyanese understand that there are very important things that the coalition government has done regarding this PSA. And one is the insistence that we have audit provisions. And the second is, of course, us enforcing that by commissioning the first audit. If we had not insisted that Guyana have these rights, if we had not ensured that that initial audit was commissioned, we would have seen tens of billions of dollars go down the drain. Now, there is no point in us even having a discussion around revenues if we're not going to have a serious discussion around the auditing. Because all that can happen is your costs can be inflated and your revenues, no matter what the agreement is, not amount to anything. The reason that we are stressing the audit is because we believe that is important, and we have to credit the coalition government for this particular provision. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
You have a question in the chat from Mr. Leron Brummel.
One moment, let me just check that. Okay, he says his mic is not working. All right, so I'll read the question. Mr. Norton spoke about the quality of houses being constructed, and has there been any assessment to come to this conclusion, and who did the assessment?
First of all, if you drive and see what is happening, you don't need any sophisticated assessment. It is obviously poor quality. And secondly, in the statement, we call on the appropriate agencies to do the assessment and to determine whether they meet the requisite standards. I had the opportunity to see some of these houses at, I think it's Fort Ordnance, when I was in Berbice a while back. And I had the opportunity to talk with at least one or two persons who went to see if they would accept it. And both persons that I engaged said they would not accept it. It was too small. There was no proper place for a kitchen, and that it was real low quality. So I would think that anybody can visit, if they're permitted by the investors, and see it and assess for themselves. For instance, let me say this. Let's assume you're building flat houses for people. Unless you decide that the person will live there until death, you will do a number of things, including put the beams and columns in a way that the person can go up. How these houses are being constructed, the occupant will have to basically redo foundation, put column, etc., to ensure that they can go up. Now, if you're seriously thinking about the Guyanese people and helping the Guyanese people, then you can build relatively low cost housing, put proper foundation, put proper beams and columns so that when the person is ready to go up, they can and expand and create more space. It is our view that when you're constructing houses, you should construct them in a way that allows the family to live and live comfortably. Two closed bedrooms in this modern world cannot be the solution to poor people accessing housing. You imagine a situation in which you have a man, his wife, and children, and there's little or no space. Then a lot of the activities that should be adult activities will be either experienced by sight or by hearing in such an environment. So one has to consider the negative consequences of those kinds of activity.
All right. Mr. Brummel has another question here. It says, on the ICJ ruling, can Mr. Norton offer a response on the court throwing out Venezuela's submission?
I didn't hear that.
He is asking if you will comment on the ICJ ruling to throw out the Venezuela
In
submission.
fact, our shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs would have made a release, I think, and it says, the APNUAFC stands with the government and people of Guyana in welcoming the decision handed down today, April 6, 2023, by the International Court of Justice. With the court's rejection of Venezuela's preliminary objection, the way has now been cleared for the ICJ to adjudicate on the merits of the case in pursuit of a final and binding judgment on this matter. May I point out that one of the areas we are in full support of government's position is the Ghana-Venezuela territorial controversy. We believe that the arbitral award of 1899 settled the issue, and we were in the forefront of initiating judicial settlement, having utilized over both the PNC and the PPP government the good offices and attempting to use other avenues which did not produce results. And so we are unanimous that we should have gone to the International Court of Justice. We are unanimous in our views that Essequibo belongs to the people of Guyana. We are unanimous in our views that the court has jurisdiction, and we will continue to support the government and people of Guyana on this very critical issue.
All right, thank you. Mr. Adam Harris, is your hand up again, or?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
Comrade Leader, two quick things. We'll deal with the comment you just made. On Tuesday, an American reporter examining Biden's role in the Latin America, he said the U.S. is losing. He stated that in 2018, Venezuela had a plan, a very solid draft plan to invade Guyana. And Brazil released the information, and Bolsonaro might have been influential in stopping that invasion. Were you aware of any such plan?
I will submit that I read the article. I will submit that I had no idea of such a plan, but I will submit that with some of the actions we are seeing, we have to take the to increase the diplomatic effort to ensure that we protect our territorial integrity at the diplomatic level and to stave off any attempt at invasion. It is one of the reasons for which we have been historically opposing invasions of any kind, because of this danger. It wouldn't surprise me if that Brazil would have intervened. Brazil's foreign policy has been based on the view that borders are sacrosanct, and therefore Brazil will not want to accommodate invasion at any point. It must be recognized here that except for one or two countries, Brazil is bordered by all the other countries in Latin America, and therefore this whole question of invasion is a question they will have to keep their eyes on and be very condign when it comes to dealing with issues of aggression against territories.
Thank you.
And quickly on the housing thing, this is going back to your statement. You talked about the quality of the houses being constructed. I saw photographs of those houses, and I think they're being offered for $7 million as low-cost housing. My daughter, who lives in the US, recently constructed a two-story building in Sophia, very large building. And when we total the cost of that, 2 stories, a total of what? 5 bedrooms, 3 upstairs, 2 downstairs, a big veranda and all of that. She spent just about $6 million. How can we explain the high cost for these supposedly low-cost houses?
Well, first of all, you're dealing with a government that is extremely corrupt. I recall while we were in government, we did a model house at Kurukuru, which was 2 bedrooms, self-contained, toilets, etc. And it was at $4-point-something million. Let's say it increased by another million. It's larger than those houses. I cannot see how is it that those things they are building can cause that amount of money. In the case of private investors, I know that they expect to make a profit, but I don't think it can be that large. So for me, it's a ripoff.
Thank you. All right, any other questions on the press statement? Ms. Davina?
Hi, sorry, my question is not on the press statement, but can I go ahead anyways?
One moment. Let me just ensure
Sure.
nobody else has anything else on the press statement, and then we'll move on. So is there any?
Yes, I would like to talk to Mr. Lowe about the audit. The audit was supposedly 2 years in the making. GRA released a statement which said that there were procedural things that prevented the release of the audit. What about procedure in this thing? I don't know anything about oil. But what about procedure can take 2 years for the release of an audit?
Well, the first thing we want to clarify is that GRA said that there were procedural issues that they had to go back to IHS Market about. But the 2021 date already accounts for the back and forth between the GRA and IHS Market. And so we're talking about an additional 2 years after the GRA would have dealt with all of those procedural issues with the particular auditor. And so this is an additional 2 years, which is raising all of these questions. Now, of course, a few months could be provided for the operator to make their comments regarding the audit. But of course, many analysts are saying, why didn't the government say this is the stage that the audit is at back in 2021, and that this is what is going to happen? It will be released in a few months. Rather, the government chose to be mum, say nothing about this, and let 2 years pass, which is an unusually long period of time before now. Again, let's recall, it's not that the government has finally released this audit, it is that it has found its way into the public. And so the question, I think, must be asked whether the government intended to ever release the audit. And it is our belief that left to their own devices, they will never release any audit, and they'll be perfectly happy to let the billions of dollars go by the wayside.
In fact, Adam, if you look at what is happening the government is decreasing the capacity of those institutions to monitor and to do assessment. While Vincent Adams was at the EPA, there was a structured program of developing the skill set needed to be able to do proper environment impact assessment. Clearly, that is being removed. And what you're getting right now is all you're getting is waivers of the environment impact assessment. And so that is an indication that the government has no interest in the environment, except, of course, if they can make some money on it. But when it comes to conservation activities, when it comes to protecting the Guyanese people, they prefer to opt for the money that will flow rather than having a link between income and the protection of our people. Consistently, we talked about developing the capacity to monitor and audit, and we have not seen any decisions to improve that capacity and capability. Even when you look at the scholarship that have been awarded, you are not seeing a focus on scholarships to train people in the fields we need to be able to audit, to be able to monitor, to be able to evaluate. So it does appear to me that the government's interest is in, yes, having money coming from oil, they put it in infrastructure, nice place to get involved in corruption. But when it comes to genuinely protecting the interests of the people of Guyana, the government is found wanting.
All right, thank you. All right. At this time, I will open the floor for any other questions. I'll go with Ms. Divina and then Ms. Svetlana.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, can you give the opposition's position on the sale of the Guyana Marriott?
Well, I would say a number of things. First of all, let's go back. When the Marriott was built, there were a lot of concerns because at the time, we didn't have the kind of traffic we're having and the need for occupancy. Now, the government faced all of those liabilities over the years. I think I remember Minister Jordan talking about what had to be done to save the Marriott, etc. Now, in principle, the Marriott now exists because by pure accident, having built the Marriott with no plan, oil was discovered, and now you have need for the accommodation. I believe we will have to do an assessment of, one, is my understanding is that it is profitable at present. One has to look at if it is kept and properly managed and it will bring income to the people of Guyana, then I would say it shouldn't go. If, however, it's a case where it constitutes a drain on the economy, then it's another thing. So for me, a proper assessment has to be done, and then one will then decide whether it should be kept or it should be sold. While I believe there is a role for the private sector, I do not believe that the state should expend resources and then hand it over to the private sector at the expense of the people of Guyana.
Thank you. Ms. Svetlana? News Source?
Hi, good morning.
Good
Svetlana Marshall from News Source.
Good morning.
Mr. Norton, a local nomination day for local government elections is just days away. Could you say if APNU has decided on the way forward?
We have always been in preparation for local government election. We have always said that we don't intend to let loose of our strongholds. at the level of the party across the country, we are preparing for a local government election. It doesn't necessarily follow that we will participate. But at present, we see the need to prepare. We see the need to get ready. There are still things we think need to be challenged. And so that's our position at this stage.
Thank you. Any other questions as we are coming sharply to the close of time?
Sorry. Yes, please, Adam Harris again.
Go ahead.
Just one question. Comrade Leader, how accurate would I be if I say that there are elements trying to sow seeds of discord within the ranks of your party? And one incident has been the news that the party attempted to prevent its general secretary from entering the compound.
First of all, it is totally untrue that the general secretary was prevented from entering the compound. In political parties, there are always people who sometimes disagree. Those are issues we will deal with within the party. As leader of the party, I've been very lenient. I have accommodated different positions. For me, it is looking at what is the best interest of the party, and then the best interest of the party can never be high division. And so we will work to deal with whatever appears to be division and produce a united party and move forward to take government away from the PPP. Our major focus will be on organizing our membership and leadership to take the reins of government in Guyana.
Sorry, and quickly, sir, if I may, Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm always interested in the court scene. Now, a number of people were charged for all kinds of offenses stemming from the 2020 elections. I'm hearing nothing more about these cases. I know these people have lodged significant sums in the court system, and they're awaiting their day in court. Do you know, sir, if there has been any movement to have these court matters heard? And if they're not being heard, are you in a position to say why not?
Well, first of all, I know there's been a movement on at least one case, but I'm not allowed at this stage to get into the details. The time will come when the details will come. Now, you have to understand what the government is doing. The government is, one, seeking to instill fear. Two, the government is seeking to harass and to create anxiety and problems for people. And so in the process, they are trumping up charges, and they know full well that they don't have a case. So all they keep doing is putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. The aim is not, it has nothing to do with justice. It has nothing to do, it's a political ploy to ensure you harass the opposition, instill fear, so that you can do as you like. My own view is that we will go to the next election without many of those cases concluding, because there is no evidence, they're trumped up charges, and the government, as it controls the Guyana police force, it calls out the police force to carry out its activities. You just have to look at the recent case with Takuma Gunsi. Takuma Gunsi said nothing close to what one Mr. Khan said. He actually said he was going to kill out all the black people. And he ranted and raved. If you go to Facebook, you will see the racial hostility. But there's the selective use of the Racial Hostility Act. So it is not a case of enforcing law. It's a case of using the machinery to politically harass the opponents of the government with the hope that they will subject them. And so I don't anticipate they are going to move forward with any of the cases. I anticipate that they will continue to harass people. They will continue to trump up more charges. But they know full well that they don't have a case, and therefore just use the court to delay it and make people's lives miserable. We have been urging our supporters to be very clear about what is happening. The set that they charge on terrorism, again, they can't produce any evidence of any terrorist act except on the part of the police, who are using the law enforcement to achieve political ends, which they should not be doing. And so I don't see an attempt to have the matters resolved in the court. It's just political harassment of your political opponents.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? At this time, I see no other hands being raised. So I would like to thank you for joining our press conference today. Do hope that you enjoy your Easter weekend and, celebrate Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Easter Monday. Do have a wonderful weekend. So, yeah, it's